European Union's open border policy has resulted in a massive influx of migrants in the last few years, surging to more than 1 million at its peak. So how did this happen? This week, we're taking a closer look at the EU's immigration crisis and what America can learn from it. Here to start us off is former State Department press officer Morgan Ortagus. Morgan, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, Pete.
So you see these tweets from the president about NATO, and that's one issue. But another issue is what's happened inside the borders or borderless countries of Europe. As we've seen this influx of migrants, it's going to change the complex of these countries. How has Europe changed as a result of the surges of migrants?
Well, Pete, like any of these issues, dealing with a migrant issue is incredibly complex. So if you go back to 1985, that's when the European countries had the Schengen Agreement, where they agreed to basically open borders, where you could have travel and goods throughout the European Union. But the real issue here, Pete, is where do the migrants come from in the first place, and what are the economic conditions in Europe that's creating all of this? So really, if you look at the main countries that are dealing with this, it's Italy and Greece, because that's where most of the migrants come from. And when that happens, according to EU rules, you have to go and seek asylum in the first countries that you enter. So there's something like 1.8 million over the last few years that have came in since we've really seen the crisis in Syria and Libya and other places unfold. Yeah. And they're having to absorb an incredibly large amount of migrants.
Morgan, another country absorbing a ton of migrants is Germany. And here's the numbers, just how they've changed, even from 2013 to 2016. 109,000 in 2016. Over 722,000. Of course, what happened in Syria there, the civil war, is a big part of that influx. But has Europe adjusted to the reality that their demographics are going to change if they don't deal with their borders?
Well, I think that, so we've seen over the past few years, the numbers have came down quite dramatically. And I think that's because we have had a little bit more resolution in Syria, although that war goes on. We've also seen European nations make agreements with North African countries to try to limit the number of migrants, especially the number of smugglers. I mean, you see the same thing that you see on our border, human traffickers taking advantage of an awful situation. But here's where I think that this message ties in with what the president is saying, Pete, that it's so important. The president is urging these European countries, these NATO countries, to spend more on their own defense.
Yes.
And back in 2012, I was screaming because then President Barack Obama did nothing about Syria when they crossed the red line. What happens when you have these failed states like Syria, when you see what's going on in Libya today in Africa, when the U.S., when NATO, if we choose not to lead in these countries and help resolve these crises, then you're going to see that's the cause of all of these migrants and people seeking asylum, because there's a civil war going on in their country. What else are they going to do?
Absolutely, Morgan. Very interesting stuff. And it'll be interesting to see how these NATO countries respond to the call for increasing their defense budgets. Tomorrow, we're going to go to part. He's exactly right. And that's how you strengthen the alliance. Tomorrow, we're going to get to the crux of how this migrant crisis started. Morgan, thanks for kicking us off. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
You got it.